Good evening. It is 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on the East Coast, right? That's 4 p.m. on the West Coast, and where I am, it is quite a little bit later than that. All right, my name is Miss Jacqueline Pinkney. You can call me Miss Pinkney. I think later on we'll be able to have more interaction, but for these initial classes, for the first few classes, you'll just be listening to me. There won't be as much interaction as we embark on our journey to learn more about, or to practice more for some of you, the SAT and the ACT. Now, I know some of you may have already taken a test, and some of you may not have. This is a crash course before the test next month, so we have about 4 weeks together. What we're going to learn about, as you can see, the reading portion of the test, the verbal portion. Okay, so let's get started. So what does it test? What do these tests actually test? The SAT and the ACT, they're standardized tests, right? So they're pattern tests. Standard means there's a pattern to it. And so by having these tests, does this actually test for success? Actually, the answer is no. At one point, people thought that the SAT and the ACT, that they actually stood for something, that it was the standardized aptitude test of something, or scholastic aptitude test. That is no longer true, right? Basically, they're testing your skills, your test-taking skills, how well you can take a test. Of course, there are some other important skills that are necessary, and that's why we're here, right? Of course, you need to know how to read. You need to know how to do math, right? And there are certain types of things that we can do to help improve our chances in being successful on the test and getting a higher score. So when we look at the reading tests, they for the SAT and for the ACT, they are similar, but then they are also different. Let's look to see at those similarities and differences. Now with the SAT reading test, you have 52 questions, and you have 65 minutes to answer those questions. So that gives you about how much time per question? Some people would say, write this, some people would say you have about 1 minute, 1 minute per question, right? That's not actually the case, because you forgot about that. You actually need to read the passages. So you actually have less than a minute. Right? You have less than a minute per question. Okay? So especially when you have to read everything, analyze it, read the questions, go back, right? So, but what about for the ACT? Okay. You have 40 questions, and you have 35 minutes, so even less time. So before, when you thought for the SAT that you can at least do one question per minute, and then you thought, oh, wait a second, you actually need to read the passages, it's even less for the ACT. So you are under more pressure. The time pressure is real. The time pressure, it's a lot. So many of you won't actually finish it, and that's okay, right? The more the practice, the faster that you're going to get, but don't expect miracles and being able to read everything and then being able to answer all the questions, right? You're going to also learn some more techniques to help shorten the time it takes for you to read. But yes, as you can see, the significant difference between the SAT reading and the ACT reading is the time constraints. Okay, so with the reading, you may see here, what's this have to do with what we're reading? Well, actually has nothing to do with what you're going to be reading on the SAT or the ACT. You're not going to be reading some romantic novel or reading anything about, the latest superheroes. I know that's really big with the Avengers and all of that. That's actually fun reading. So it would be nice if that was the type of reading that we're supposed to do when we're doing these standardized tests, but that is not the case, right? So, but reading these types of things can be useful because the more you read, the better you get at it. So let's look at the types of passages. What is the type of reading that you're going to come across? Well, you will come across a passage that may cover the U.S. or world literature, some of them well-known authors that you may or may not have read. You'll have a passage that is a speech, by a notable person. Most speeches that people that we know a lot about are, for example, Abraham Lincoln and Martin Luther King. You see that a lot. Global conservation, the founding documents, the U.S. Constitution, which I don't know about you, but that's pretty dry reading, right? And also it contains a lot of legalese. Legalese meaning the language that lawyers use. And if you've read any legal document, you know that it seems it takes a long time for them to get to what they want to say, right? They use a lot of very dense vocabulary, very hard vocabulary, and also just vocabulary that we don't use day to day, right? So it helps to practice those types, reading those types of passages. Then you'll have a passage on economics, psychology, sociology, or any social issue, which for me, I actually enjoy because that's what I studied. I studied anthropology and sociology. So when I read about a social phenomenon, that affects the world and affects people, affects culture, then I'm actually more engaged. And it's true, the more engaged we are in reading, the easier it is for us to remember it. Right, so if it's something that doesn't interest us, then we're not going to be engaged. We're not going to pay attention as much. So, but that it is what it is, right? But what we're going to learn to do is, we just tackle it the same way, no matter what passage it is, no matter if we're interested in it or not. The job is the same. And then we have a section where you have two passages, and normally it's covering the same concept, but they have a different perspective. Or the perspectives can be the same, but they mention different aspects of it. And you need to pay attention to how they are similar and how they are different. Do they agree with one another? Do they disagree? And how do they do so? So now we go more into the nitty-gritty of the passages. You may have something that has expository prose. Expository prose basically means that it's giving information, right? Giving more details, providing specifics to the reader. Rhetorical prose could be more along the persuasive nature. Narrative prose, as you know, it's coming from someone's point of view, them telling something, maybe it's autobiographical. So some examples of expository prose are a traditional essay, a letter to the editor, maybe something that you've done before, research paper. Clearly most of you have done this in school, especially in high school. A newspaper story, maybe some of you are on the newspaper at high school as well. A press release, articles, and science textbooks. Now examples of rhetoric prose include essays, and we've done a lot of that, persuasive essays. It could also be maybe if you're in speech and debate, right? You've had to write the essays that you then present, for public speaking, blog posts, or magazines. Narrative prose can be fiction or nonfiction. Stories, told from different points of view. Novels could be short stories, long stories, novels, biographies, and so on. So why only these passages? Why do they select these certain types? And you probably have guessed it, because those are the types of things that you're going to be expected to read and expected to analyze in college. As it says there, SAT reading passages are handpicked as they represent the kinds of prose the students are most likely to encounter in a college liberal arts curriculum. So they want to see, can you handle that? And if your high school has a rigorous program, especially for English literature or world literature, then it may not be so bad for you. Okay. So, what are some types of questions, though, or what are some things that you should think about, I should say, whenever you are reading? So, you want to think about the purpose. And the purpose answers the question, why? Why did the author write this? Right? What's the point, right? What is he or she trying to say? Then, the central theme. It answers the question of what? What is the author talking about exactly? Then we have style and tone. It answers the question of how. It's not what you said, it's how you say it. So, for example, if you're at home and your mother calls you, you're in your room, you're sleeping, and if your mother calls your name, you know if you're in trouble or not based on the tone of her voice. We all know. We all know. And that's the same whenever you are reading a passage. Every author will have his or her style of writing, and they will have their own tone. Whether that's a comical tone, a serious tone, suspenseful tone. As you are reading, you want to think about these. Next, we have the approach. Okay. Pardon me. Sorry, I heard the audio is too low. Let me turn it up for you all. I hope you all can hear it. Okay. All right, hopefully that is better. Okay. I hope you all can hear me now. And hopefully that is better. And I got some feedback that maybe my volume was too low. And hopefully now that is better for everyone. Okay. So let's go ahead and continue. Okay. So the approach, the type of approach that we want to have is, okay, we want to be focused. Okay, we all know that doing a standardized test is not exciting. It's boring, right? And so you want to get yourself in the mindset of, like a detective, right? You're on a mission, and you want to focus on the mission, right? Okay, you're going to have a certain set of passages. Maybe you like reading, maybe you don't. It doesn't matter because it's something that you have to do. Standardized tests, though maybe in certain states, maybe they don't really look at them as heavily as much anymore. They look at the whole student, but it's part of the reality, right? So you want to focus. And as you learn different tools and learn different techniques, you want to keep those in mind as you are attacking, the test, as you are attacking the reading section. So you want to focus, you want to engage, right? You know the job, you know what you need to do. So there's no guessing, right? The more you practice, the easier it's going to become. Open it up. All right, what do we have in front of us? What type of passage is it? And then break it down. And then, as we say, attack. All right then. So, and really it is all about your attitude that you bring into the test. That is really going to determine a lot, right? If you go into the test really thinking and believing that, oh no, I'm not a really good test taker, you have low self-confidence, we're not all perfect at everything, right? But we can get better at stuff. We can get better at things. We can apply ourselves, and we can, and if we keep in mind what the true purpose is, right? This is just a stepping stone to get to something bigger and better, right? So as you see here, it says, if you don't like something, change it. If you can't change it, change the way you think about it, right? The test is a test. You've taken tests before. It's okay, right? It's nothing to be afraid of. It's nothing to be super stressed about. Of course, many of us still feel stressed because they're like, oh, my future depends on it, right? Yes and no, right? You're still going to have a really bright future no matter how well you do on this test, whatever your results are, right? We go into it, we're realistic, and we know that it's something that we have to do, and we know that the more we practice, the better we're going to get at it, and you just continue to do that. Okay, so now, let's look at the types of questions. So you have summary-based questions, and when we say the types of questions, you're going to see these over and over again, I've been teaching test prep for so long. You probably can tell by my gray hair how old I am, right? So for more than 10 years, I've been teaching test prep. And like we said, a standardized test means that if there's a standard, there's a pattern, right? We look for the pattern, and this is part of the pattern. Summary. Okay, you know what a summary is. What is this? What is this? What is this mainly about? Right? Inference based. When you have inference, you basically take what you've read and then try to read between the lines, so to speak. Right? Based on the information that is there, what can we safely say for sure? Right? Factual. Basically, did the author say this, or did the character, in the story say something or do something, right? Did this author make this point? You go back to the passage and find out, okay, yes or no, right? Paired questions. So paired questions, which they used to not have on the SAT, where you have a question that you answer and then you have to find the proof, right? And so it will show you, it will clearly indicate on there that those two questions go together, right? Where do you find where's the evidence for the previous question? So, and the techniques that we're going to need include skimming and scanning. Now, I know these aren't anything new. To skim, right? And some people don't like doing this. I have to admit, some people don't like. I like to actually read everything because I feel like I'm going to miss something. But as we saw with the ACT, we don't have a lot of time. We don't, right? So you have to buy your time, so to speak, right? And that's where skimming comes into play, right? You can, and there's different ways that you can skim, whether it's you read the first sentence of every paragraph or you read the first full paragraph, the introductory paragraph, and then the first sentence, and then the last sentence of the following paragraphs. There's different ways of doing that, right? And it is a skill that you need to practice. It is a skill that you need to practice. Scanning. Now, scanning comes into play whenever you've gone to your questions, like you've already, skimmed your passage. You go to the questions and you're looking for keywords, right? Those keywords can be the number lines, where you need to look for something. It could be a character name. It could be a vocabulary word, right? And that's where you go and you then look and scan and try to find that information so that you can find the answer. Okay, and so when we have you say you've done the whole section, and you're like, okay, so what do I get? Right? What's the score I get? Well, there's a difference between the raw score and the scaled score, right? Your raw score basically is how many questions you got right? And of course, we want to get as many as possible, but you most likely are going to want to set a goal for each section. That's what I truly recommend. Don't tell yourself, well, I want to get them all right. Well, don't we all want to get them all right? But you want to, the best way is to be informed in terms of figure out the school that you want to go to, right? Then look at the types of scores that students, admitted students have gotten. What is the average, right? So then you look at that score and then you work backwards, right? To then see that based on that scaled score, which is what they calculate after you've gotten your however many questions right or wrong, it then translates into that scaled score, right? So that final score that we're looking for. So you work backwards, look at what the scaled score is and that you're shooting for, and then what are the number of questions you need to get right in order to mean the raw score in order to get the scaled score, right? And there's a lot of, I wouldn't say there's a lot of controversy, but there is some controversy about, why have two different, ways of looking at it. And it just, historically, that's how it's been. You get the total number correct, and then they then look at the different versions of the test, and then they kind of weight it to see, certain questions may may, be worth a little bit more, or maybe you don't have to get as many questions correct, especially if they're a little bit more difficult. They're always trying out different types of questions, right? To see, because it's humans who make this test, right? And so they're going to try really a lot of different things. So you may take one version of the test and it may seem like it's a little bit harder, but because it's a little bit harder, you may not have to get as many questions right. And what's easy or hard is different for every person. And so it's just up to you to, evaluate what type of test taker you are and see, like, what are the types of questions, what are the types of things that you're really good at, and what are the things that you're the weakest at, and then focus on those weaknesses and try to make them, stronger, right? So that you can get the raw score you want, which then translates into the scaled score that you want. All right then, so now we're going to transition. Okay, I'm going to transition to the next portion. Okay, as we continue our journey into evidence-based reading and our text structures. Okay, so when you think of text structure, what can that possibly mean? Okay, so text structure. What is text structure? It basically is how information in a passage is organized. We will study 5 common patterns, right? We have cause and effect, compare and contrast, problem and solution, sequential, and description. Now, you may be familiar with these, and actually when you think about it, all the things that you see in the test you have seen before, right? In terms of reading, if you've been reading since you were 6 years old, 7 years old, right? You've come across all of these types of passages, all these types of structures, right? So when you think about it, you should have a little bit more confidence in yourself and knowing that actually these are the types of things that I've read before. Now it's just you never really had to analyze them on this scale, right? But as we said, the more you practice, the better you're going to get at it. Okay. So let's look at cause and effect, right? So we're going to put this in very simple terms, okay? So that you can at least see. And it's basically a review for you all. So cause and effect, an action and its results are explained. Cause, students did not learn the material, right? What's the effect? Well, if you didn't learn, if you didn't study, what happens? You perform poorly on the test, but that's not going to happen with us. Definitely not. No, we're going to be prepared, right? So we should change that. That the cause, the students learned the material thoroughly, and the effect is that they did an amazing job on the test. Let's think in really positive. Let's think in positive terms, okay? Let's manifest what we want to see. Let's use those positive thinking and positive words. All right, compare and contrast. This seems easy enough. Tells how two things are similar and different. You've done that in your life. Let's compare and contrast cities, right? New York versus Los Angeles. Or maybe food, apples and oranges, right? How are they alike? How are they different? Both are fruits. Both have skin. Sorry for the format of this. But not everyone, eats those fruits, and and the skin is a bit different, right? Oh, yeah, and oranges have more juice. Well, some people may say that's debatable, but but usually yes. Now, problem and solution. We all have problems, but do we have solutions for them? There's a problem and an answer. There's an answer that is suggested. So, For example, the property is being spray painted, or it needs to be spray painted. You need to do some work on the house, right? Now, normally, especially in the US, if you need to get any work done on the house, you may think, well, okay, just hire someone to do it. But before you even do that, you may need to, get the permits and the license to do that, right? So you have a problem, something needs to be fixed, something needs to be remedied, you need to rectify it, and then you find the solution for it. And don't confuse that with cause and effect, right? You may think that, okay, this problem was caused by something, but now you're looking at what comes after that, right? You're not looking at what comes before, it's what comes after. And sequential. Well, this is something that, like I said, all the stuff that you've already done and the things that you've already known. The information is listed step by step and explains how to do it or how it happens. So, say we're making an omelet. What do? First, you crack a few eggs. Then you cook it on one side. But wait a second, we want to add some things. Maybe add some cheese, add some veggies. What comes after that? You flip the omelet, right? And so you may, in a passage, have to be able to identify the different things that happen and when they happen. Description. This may seem a little bit easier with all of those, because basically it's just describing how something looks. Maybe it's describing a character, right? A setting, a situation. So when you think about, well, what about my bedroom, right? What's in the room, right? Maybe you have some windows, something's on the wall, some pictures. Maybe the bed's in the middle. Maybe it's in the in the corner somewhere. Maybe it's by the door. Maybe you have a television across from the bed. Maybe you have some bookshelves. Maybe you have some lamps, right? Especially during COVID, maybe many of us spend a lot of time in our bedrooms, right? So you probably are able to describe a lot of things in your house. And I know these are very simplistic examples that I'm giving you, right? And that's really just to explain the concept. You know that as we get actually into the test, that the passages, the examples of these are a little more difficult. I get it. I do. I get it. They are more difficult. They're not, the bedroom, right? 2 windows, bed, television, right? It's going to have some sort of Shakespearean slant to it, right? Where it's using vocabulary that you may never heard of in ways that you've never seen, right? So yes, I do get it. But this is really just to go over the basics, the foundation of, okay, what are the types of things that you're going to see? What's the format? What's the structure? And then once you know the structure, then you know how to approach it in a different way, or depending on what it is. Okay. So tips you can do to follow to identify, the structure, and this is for any sort of reading, right? And actually any section of the test, right? So as you are taking the test, you want to continue to ask yourself questions about what's happening, right? So, for example, the first one, ask, what is the author doing in this paragraph? And put it in your own words. I take every practice test that I give my students, and I never suggest anything that I don't do myself. So as you are reading, or as I'm reading, I talk to myself. Now that may seem crazy, but as you are talking to yourself and talking through the passage, it's helping you to process things, right? And not everyone may be like that, right? I had a student who, say for example, as I am reading, I actually like to take notes. And I had a student that did not need to take notes, and I thought, how's he going to remember? Because there are certain procedures, certain processes that we do that help us to better recognize, the structure and to break things down, right? And annotating is one of them. The student didn't need to do it. And he was able to process everything just through the first read through. Did he always answer the questions right? Actually, most of the time, right? And so any of the tips that we give you are exactly that, just tips. And you're going to have to try to find what works best for you. So, but as you're reading, asking yourself, okay, what is this author doing in this paragraph? Because you know they're going to ask you something about it. You know there's going to be some question about it. So instead of passively reading, and passively reading is something that you do when you're reading Harry Potter, or maybe an edition of Elle magazine, or a sports article of some sort. You're not really reading to remember, right? But with the SAT and the ACT, you're reading to remember. So as you read, ask yourself, what is this author doing? And put it into your own words. If you have a hunch, if you have a guess, check if, when you read the question, if you're like, oh, okay, I think it's this based on what I read, check to see if the information fits. Remember to check back in the passage to see, okay, is my hunch correct? And look for signal words. So signal words can be many different things, right? As you are reading, some typical signal words could be transition words. Those are the easiest ones to identify, right? Because normally those transition words at the very beginning of each paragraph, right? So you can know that if it's congruent, meaning in line with what was said before, or different. Now, and that's basically things for maybe, an informational text, not for, a piece of literature, right? Whenever you have those signal words, right? In terms of for the transition between paragraphs. But even with, say, if you're reading, an excerpt from a piece of literature, you do want to see how things are shifting, right? How the mood is shifting, how the tone is shifting. And maybe there isn't really a big shift. Maybe there isn't, right? And so, but you still want to ask yourself those things as you are reading through. You're like, what is happening here, right? When you go to your questions, put into your own words what you think the answer could be, then go back to the passage and check. Okay, so why don't we practice? Okay, let's practice. Now, like I said, the questions aren't going to be extremely hard. This is just the beginning. Right, this is just the beginning, and so so we don't want it too hard at the beginning. Okay, so I'm going to give you time to read through the text, and then you're going to answer questions about the text. Okay, so the first is to provide a description or present information. So these are the samples types of passages that that we went over earlier. Okay, so I will read. And so some of you may not want to hear me read, but this is just I can model for you what I think as I'm reading, or what questions I ask as I'm reading. Okay, so we know this is a description. Okay, so what is it describing? This black-eyed, wide-mouthed girl, not pretty, but full of life, with black curls tossed backward, thin, bare arms, little legs, and lace-frilled drawers. Okay, lace-frilled drawers. That makes me think of something quite, earlier times. I think Victorian times or something like that, right? And so it's quite descriptive of who she is and what she looks like, right? The physical features. I'll continue. And feet in low slippers, was just at that charming age when a girl is no longer a child. So it's some sort of transition, though the child is not yet a young woman. Escaping from her father, she ran to hide her flushed face in the lace of her mother's shawl. Flushed face makes me think, oh, was she embarrassed, right? Or maybe she was running around and, and tired. And when you run around and get tired, then you become a little bit flustered and, the blood rushes to the face. Not paying the least attention to her severe. Okay, we're back. We had some technical difficulties. I'm sorry. So yes, and we're concluding. We're almost done. I'm finished. I promise. We're almost finished. Okay. So let us finish with the practice and the application. Right. We were just finishing up the descriptive passage. Okay, here we go. So, and we were answering the question. So that was our paragraph, that that was our excerpt about the girl. What is the main topic of this paragraph? The girl's features or the girl, right? Well, it was mainly about, her features, right? I mean, because we just say the girl, that could be about anything, right? But if we go back, let's go back, right? We see that description, right, of, her face, what she was wearing, right? So it's more about those physical characteristics, right? So you also want to be careful of that whenever you have these main idea type questions, because sometimes you're going to get very general answers, right? And sometimes depending on what your answer choices are, you're going to want the more general answer, and sometimes you're not, right? So it depends on what else is there, right? So talk yourself through it, right? Did I see this? Did I read about the girl's features, or did I read just in general about the girl? And did I get a lot of general things about her, right? So in this case, it was a little bit more specific. So for this instance, then we need something that is a more specific answer. So what does the author explain in the paragraph? She's not pretty. She is full of life, right? So, okay, so both of those were mentioned though, right? So in this case, we want to go back once again. Sorry, let's go back. Okay. This black-eyed, wide-mouthed girl, not pretty, but full of life, with black curls tossed backward, thin, bare arms, little legs, right? Escaping from her father, she ran aside to hide her flushed face. So, yes, it says that she wasn't pretty, but that wasn't the whole point, because then it says, but full of life. And then we go into more of the description to kind of back up how she was full of life, right? So, the more correct answer is she is full of life, not that she is not pretty, right? Because what is the author actually explaining, right? So you want to be careful of those types of questions as well, or these types of answer choices that are right, but are they right? Right? Are they totally correct? Does it really answer the question? You want to pay attention to that. And if you need to, underline and circle those things that you need to focus on. What is the author's purpose in writing this paragraph? Why? Why is he writing about this girl? To describe, who she is, what stage she is in her life, right? Oh, to describe the girl, to describe the girl's shyness. Okay, well, the shyness was one of those things, maybe, but not really, because it was saying about how she was full of life. Yeah, she hid behind her father, but we had a lot more than that, right? So the main purpose is to describe the girl. All right, so let's go on to the next one. All right, so what do we have here? I want you to read it. I won't read it this time. I'll let you read on your own. I'll give you 1 minute. It shouldn't take you even a minute, but go ahead. Then I'll read. Okay, I'm back. Right? So you're like, well, it wasn't a minute. It was a minute. It's close enough, right? So, okay. So did you ask yourself those questions as you were reading it, right? In terms of what is the author saying? What is it about? What's going on here? All right, then, as it says, certain authors following Varro have maintained that the civilization of Rome died a natural death, the normal result of old age. Okay, we're learning about a city and, I guess the rise and fall of the city. Is it mere fancy to suppose that nations have their birth, their maturity, and their decline under an unbreakable law like that which determines the life history of the individual? Are cities just like, people? Do they have their own life, right? Do they go through stages just like a human goes through stages, right? From infancy to adolescence to adulthood, and then finally to death. Is that what a city is like as well? Nations? A nation may be broken up if wrongly led or attacked by a superior force, and it will suffer if its population of effective leaders is. Okay, so we're going to go, we don't have the rest, but we can assume, right? We can infer that we're going to see more about how Rome, how a city, right? And how this particular author talks about this author's viewpoint of how a city, how it goes through its, rise and fall, its birth to its death, right? And then what are the main reasons why, of the decline, the fall, the death, of that city. Okay, did you get that? Was that what you were thinking too? Were you processing that, or were you just reading it and saying, this is really boring? I could be doing something else. Yeah, maybe you were thinking that, right? But as you were reading it, I want you to get into the habit of, saying those things and talking to yourself, right? As if you're having to explain it to someone else. Explain it to yourself. What is going on here, right? This type of writing is a little bit different than, it's quite different than what we read before, right? And so you're like, oh, okay, all right. Then start to anticipate what's to follow. Okay, so let's see. What is the main topic of this paragraph? Say in your own words. I'll give you a few seconds. Go ahead and do it. I know. You're probably like, I already know this. That's fine. Let's get into the habit. We're building habits. We're building habits. Say it for yourself. Okay, let's look at our answer choices. The decline of Rome. Is it mainly just about the decline of Rome? Or the civilization of Rome? Civilization. Do we learn about the whole civilization? The different aspects and specifics of the civilization? Or is it more likely, is it going toward the decline of Rome? Well, yes, right? A. Okay. What is the author's purpose in writing this paragraph? Say it for yourself. Why? Why is this author presenting this? You have an answer? Okay, I know we can't interact, but later we're going to be able to, okay? To contradict the point of view that Rome died as the normal result of old age, or to describe the debacle of Rome. Now, if you remember, it did mention a certain author's name at the very beginning, right? And then wants to go into this perspective and how maybe it was different, right? And then also that's the whole title of, what, of this particular excerpt, contradicting, right? And you want to be careful of that. You always want to be careful, right? You're like, oh, Miss Pinckney, how am I going to remember everything? The more you do it, the easier it's going to get, right? So yes, it is C, to contradict the point of view that Rome died the normal result of old age. Okay, and since we're coming close to time, let's this be our last one. Okay, so take a minute to read that. To make an argument. Ask yourself those questions. What is this about? All right. Now, we're getting more serious with the content, right? Okay. Talking about murder. So, as it says, there's probably one purpose and only one for which the use of force by government is beneficial, and that is to diminish the total amount of force used by others in the world. It is clear, for example, that the legal prohibition of murder diminishes the total amount of violence in the world. Yes. If we're free to do whatever we want, we have a lot of bad things happen, right? So long as some men wish to do violence to others, there cannot be complete liberty, for either the wish to do violence must be restrained, or the victims must be left to suffer. So we just want a bunch of people going around killing people? No, we don't want that. So there needs to be some sort of restraint. There needs to be some sort of law. For this reason, although individuals in society should have the utmost freedom as regards their own lives, they ought not to have complete freedom. All right, then. So someone is making an argument saying that, you know what, complete freedom, it can't happen. Because what are the consequences, right? Okay, so let's look at our last questions here. What is the main topic of this paragraph? Is it just in general about the government or the use of force by governments? And that's what we saw in the beginning, right? Remember, A, it's too general. Are we just getting a general overview about the government? No, we're getting something that's more specific. What is the author's purpose in writing this paragraph? Think of an answer on your own. Go ahead and do it. What is the author arguing? What does the author want us to know? What does the author want us to think? Governments must sometimes use force to limit the freedoms of its citizens. People's freedoms. As you can see, this is a very straightforward, right? And it's not as difficult. You're going to say it's still not as difficult of what I'm going to see on the test. I get it, yes, but once again, we're just going over the basics. I'm trying to get you to establish habits that you will practice no matter what type of passage you are reading. Okay, the approach needs to be the same. Okay? So I think our time is up now, but if you want to keep on going, we can. Some of you may feel like, no, they don't want to. I will leave this. For those who need to go ahead. I know we had some technical difficulties, right? So it kind of delayed some of the things, in order for us to go over the types of passages. So for those who need to go, I understand, right? But for those who can stay, we can look at the final. Oops, sorry. There you go. To explore or examine ideas. Okay. All right, then. So our fun time is over. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for your patience, right? As we continue on this journey together, it's going to get better and better, and you're going to get better and better. You have to believe that. Remember, it's all in your mindset. Yeah, we have some things to work on, but that's why we're here. All right? You all have a good evening.